Alright folks, welcome back to the Don's channel. I am the Don Father and I'm about to do a reaction request from actually two people, the same request, so I'm going to thank both of them. Michael French, who's a channel member, and Kimberly Ellis, who's a patron. Thank you both very much for your support. And I'm really looking forward to this video. This is based on a guy, and you might have seen the film Hacksaw Ridge. He was a medic. He fought a war without a weapon basically, but it was because of his religious beliefs. He didn't believe in carrying a weapon. He didn't believe in taking life as such, his own personal reasons for it. So I'm not going to waste too much time. Introduction. It's quite a long video. It'll tell you everything you need to know, I'd imagine. The link to the original video will be in the description section below, as will our Patreon account if you'd like a personalised video request and shout out like Kimberly did, or if you want to join the channel as a member like Michael did, you can. That's how you can get personalised video requests. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment and share, and put the bell on so you don't miss our future uploads. Anyway, no more talking. Let's go.
The medic who fought a war without a weapon. Desmond Doss was not your average hero. He would become a Medal of Honor recipient, the United States of America's highest and most prestigious military award, as a combat medic who saved many of his comrades' lives in battle without firing a single shot, because he didn't take a weapon into combat because of his religious beliefs. Desmond Doss was born in 1919 in the state of Virginia and was raised as a strict Seventh-day Adventist, a Christian denomination that believed that Saturday was the Sabbath and that the second coming of Jesus Christ was imminent. They also believed strongly in nonviolence and a healthy diet, based typically on a vegetarian diet. Doss had been raised with a strict belief in the Bible, and when it came to the Ten Commandments, he took them to be the core values of how to lead his life. When World War II started, he was conflicted as he believed the war was a just one, but he felt that to kill another human being under any circumstance was wrong. He was already employed as a joiner at Newport News Naval Shipyard, but nevertheless he joined the United States Army on April 1, 1942. He could have requested a deferment, but he wanted to do his patriotic duty. He was assigned to an infantry unit, the 77th Division, and presumed that his classification as a conscientious objector would not require him to carry a weapon. For Doss, one commandment of the Bible stuck with him the most: "Thou shalt not kill." He wondered why he was assigned as a rifleman and not in a medical role. His commanding officer tried to pressure Doss into carrying a weapon, as they thought he would be more of a liability than an asset in combat, but Doss refused. Interestingly, even for medics, which Doss would later become, it was common practice at the time to carry either an M1911A1 pistol or M1 carbine for self-defense purposes.
Absolutely.
The rules go that a medic under the Geneva Convention is not forbidden from carrying a weapon, but if a medic fires his weapon, he stops being classed as a medic, and therefore can be legitimately fired upon by the enemy. The regimental chaplain, Captain Stanley, would soon understand Doss's protests and helped him transfer from rifleman to medical training. To make matters worse, his fellow soldiers mocked his religious beliefs. When he was reading the Bible daily and strictly observing the Seventh-day Adventist tradition of attending church every Saturday, Doss continuously requested to be allowed to have Saturdays off rather than Sundays in order to follow his Adventist beliefs that Saturday was to be observed as the Sabbath. In the end, Captain Stanley took this up with divisional headquarters, and it was decided that Adventist soldiers would have Saturdays off, just as the other men had Sunday off. This in fact made Doss even more unpopular than ever with his fellow soldiers, as he was seen to have it easy. As he had Saturdays off, none were on base on Sundays to see him pull extra duties to make up for this. One of the squad's other soldiers summed up the company's feeling about him and his Saturdays off, complaining, "You get more passes than the general." As Doss was a strict vegetarian at a time when it was unusual, it meant that the rest of the unit viewed Doss with such distrust and hostility that one man in his unit even warned him ominously, "When we go into combat, Doss, you're not coming back alive. I'm going to shoot you myself." Doss eventually became an Army combat medic, saying, "While others are taking life, I will be saving it."
Wow.
The turning point for Doss and his relationship with his company came with their first 25-mile march with full field pack and rifle, something they were expected to achieve in 8 hours. The other soldiers thought Doss would be having it easy as he would be carrying no rifle or ammo that day, but his 2 canvas medical bags were almost as heavy and much more awkward to carry than any rifle. As the march progressed, the men started to suffer from exhaustion, numerous blistered feet and dehydration, some even passed out. And all the time there was Doss, always with a helping hand, even to the extent that at the end of the march, he insisted on checking everyone's feet and administering medical aid where it was needed. By the end of that day, he had won the respect of his entire unit for his tireless devotion to his duty. For the first time, he was treated as one of their own. Doss, as the qualified combat medic of the unit, was now responsible for providing first aid and frontline trauma care on the battlefield. He would be assigned to accompany his unit into the war zone and be there with them on the front line at all times. This was soon to happen, for the 77th Division had had their first combat experience on May 11, 1943, and Doss and his comrades were urgently being trained up to replace the combat losses and help expand the division's strength. The 77th Division would end up being in combat officially for no less than 208 days, suffering a total of 9,212 casualties before the war would end. The Battle of Guam. Doss's first taste of combat was at the Battle of Guam, which was a bloody battle fought from July 21st to August 10, 1944, to recapture the U.S. territory of the island of Guam from a determined Japanese garrison of nearly 20,000 troops. Though according to the Geneva Convention, knowingly firing at a medic wearing a clear insignia is a war crime, the Japanese snipers and machine gunners tended to ignore this and saw combat medics as easy and valuable targets to gun down. So medics in the Pacific Theater were often told to avoid wearing medical insignia in case it would make them more, not less, of a target.
Wow.
Doss was under fire nearly every day during the battle and was busy doing his part in saving lives. Guam had shown Doss how cruel war could be. As his unit was pushing forward through the jungle on their first day, a young, fresh-faced recruit spotted a fountain pen laying on the jungle floor and went to pick it up. Before anyone could warn him otherwise, a white phosphorus grenade exploded. The pen had been booby-trapped.
Oh, man.
The young man who had picked up the pen, his chest now a bloody mess, had blood pouring out of an open wound. Severe burns and sharp metal fragments covered his body, and he was going into shock. By some miracle, Doss managed to stabilize his condition, administering care and helping to evacuate him and 3 other soldiers who had been wounded by flying red-hot shrapnel.
I want to say one thing at this. Being a medic in a wartime situation is probably one of the most difficult jobs in the world. There might actually be situations there where he has personal relationships with these men, so that adds to the pressure and the emotion of it as well. You're under enemy gunfire. You're panicking because you're desperately trying to save his life or patch them up. There's probably more casualties coming down at one time. No matter how much training you get for this situation, so many people can freeze, so many people can struggle under the strain of maybe mortars coming in, rounds are flying past them, explosions going off, screaming, like, could put a lot of people into shock. Just the visual sight of it can make people freeze and go into shock and actually not do what they were actually trained to do. But then there's people like Doss here. Obviously he's a truly inspiring man straight away, but this is just one point I want to make. Like, all this is going on and straight away he knows exactly what to do, how to do it, and get it done, and does not delay. The story is remarkable. I know it, and as it continues on, you're just going to be blown away. If you don't know this man's story, it's just incredible.
This was Doss's first taste of combat casualties. The U.S. casualties during the battle was truly appalling. Of the 59,000 U.S. troops who took part in the invasion, around every 1 in 6 were either killed or wounded. The Battle of Leyte. Next, Doss and his unit was involved in the Battle of Leyte in the Philippines that ran from October 17th to December 26, 1944. A vicious and prolonged battle which started with a huge U.S. coastal bombardment and amphibious landing, followed by heavy fighting the more inland the Americans went. During a Japanese counterattack, a fellow medic, Clarence Glenn, had heard the call for a medic from a machine gunner. He left the cover and went into the open, into no man's land, to get the wounded man, and was himself hit. Glenn was Doss's friend from back home and he couldn't leave him there. So he and a litter bearer, Herb Schechter, went out to find the 2 wounded and dealt with them separately. Doss was attending the machine gunner who had a gash along his face while bullets whizzed overhead. Both of the wounded were alive. They made an improvised litter out of a poncho and tree branches to get the wounded men back to the aid station, but his friend Glenn would die before he made it. From this point on, Doss would not look at the face of the men he was treating in case it was another friend. Sadly, his friend Herb would be shot and killed when he and Doss were carrying a litter as their silhouette exposed them against the sky to the enemy. On top of losing his friends, Doss was constantly hungry because the meat in the K rations conflicted with his vegetarianism, so he could only eat the tasteless crackers and coconuts he found. On Leyte, the coconuts on the ground gave him diarrhea, so he climbed the trees for fresh ones. At one point, Doss was looking for coconuts. It attracted poorly aimed Japanese machine gun fire. When they were killed by American soldiers, it was later discovered that they had been drunk on sake. One thing that shocked Doss during the most devastating times of the campaign was that the same man who had made threats towards him during training at Fort Jackson now came to him for guidance and to pray for him.
Well, it just goes to show you, no matter what way someone treats you, even if it's badly, Doss stuck to his beliefs and who he was, and didn't waver in them. And it's took a time of war, obviously, but fear for the man who bullied him, picked on him for his religious beliefs, even said to him, "I would shoot you myself," kind of a thing, is now coming to him for guidance because he realises this man goes above and beyond what normal soldiers do. He is committed to saving his fellow brothers in arms, no matter what, even if it means going behind enemy lines nearly, and getting shot at. He will get people out. And that one thing that they did actually confirm was what I was saying. Obviously he's got personal relationships with these people, and that does affect you massively. Of course, he says that would be the last time he would have looked at any of their faces. And even to this day, they say the poncho and branches, well, the way it would probably be done now is you'd probably struggle to move anyone on your own, because somebody lying there, not able to help themselves move is a heavy weight, isn't it? So you usually go with 2, but in that circumstance, they've used a poncho and branches. You would still Kazakhstan people out. I know the British would be using ponchos. Somebody just pulls a poncho out, it's lightweight, and they're strong enough to actually put a casualty into 2 years, run away and back to safety. So, well, it's just incredible. I never tire of hearing this man's story.
The Battle of Okinawa. And lastly, for Doss and the 77th Infantry Division was a battle that was to be the bloodiest battle of the war in the Pacific, as well as its largest amphibious landing. The U.S. objective was to secure the island as a base, as it was just 350 miles south of the Japanese mainland and would be strategically crucial for any future invasion of Japan. The battle started on April 1st, 1945, exactly 3 years to the day that Doss first enlisted in the Army, and the battle was to last 81 days. Doss was assigned to the 1st Battalion as their combat medic. On April 29, 1945, the 77th Division was given the task of assaulting on a 400-foot-high cliff called the Maida Escarpment. This was nicknamed by the Americans as Hacksaw Ridge.
Right, I know I'm pausing it again here, but could you imagine climbing up something so high? There's already danger in going up it anyway, isn't it? It's that high, so if you make a, if you don't hold on right or something gives way, the fall's that high, you could probably break your back, your neck, whatever, paralyse yourself, so you've got the element of that danger. And then as soon as you silhouette over the top of that, your helmet is quite an obvious shape. It breaks up the skyline. It's a foreign shape, so they'll be like, Japs will be known as well after a few men come up that bit. They're all coming up that bit, all machine guns, all weapons aimed directly on top of where the US troops are going over. So you really don't stand much chance in getting over there, not to mention getting up and over, and not to mention actually being able to storm the ground and take it. It really was something you'd have to have balls of steel to do. But obviously, as I say, the Japs' weapons, it wouldn't be long before they realised they're all coming over here. Just keep your guns on there and just pick them off. Frightening, frightening job.
They climbed the cargo net. Doss said a prayer for his comrades. When Doss's unit joined the assault, and as they neared the top of the escarpment, they came under intense Japanese artillery, small arms, and machine gun fire, inflicting severe casualties on the assaulting American troops. The American forces had sent in wave after wave of troops to try to dislodge a fanatical enemy base there who were well entrenched and camouflaged. On May 4th, while his unit was attacking a heavily fortified enemy position at the mouth of a cave, Doss went to the aid of 4 of his injured comrades. The lieutenant who led the attack on the emplacement had intended to throw a grenade when an enemy bullet hit him and delayed it, blowing his hand off and wounding his comrades. Despite having to get within 25 feet of the enemy lines and under attack by enemy grenades and gunfire, Doss managed to get to the injured men. He then managed to evacuate the men back to his own lines, one by one. During the night, the Japanese continued to throw grenades and kept up the mortar fire. The American soldiers hid in rock crevices, but the Japanese found ways to infiltrate and sneak up on them. Then, on the next day, May 5th, he came to the rescue of a wounded artillery officer who had gone to see how the artillery guns were doing. Doss's left leg was now injured, as he had fell the day before down the edge of a parapet. He climbed up the cargo net with his first aid kits, his weight falling on his bad leg. Finding him in a shell hole, the officer had been struck by shrapnel that had made a hole from his chest to his back, and Doss could hear him breathing through it. He was bleeding heavily. Doss gave him first aid while under constant enemy gunfire and shelling. He put the dressings over the large holes in the colonel's chest and back, and administered blood plasma which dangerously exposed Doss to the enemy, as he had to hold it up high. Doss's efforts here would be in vain, as the colonel, carried back on a stretcher, died before he reached the aid station. Later, there were orders to take a vital Japanese pillbox position on the reverse slope of a hill that was holding up the American advance. Desmond Doss, once he had read his prayers, was happy to support the assault. The American troops threw gasoline cans at the position, which triggered a large explosion. All of a sudden, a large Japanese counterattack overwhelmed the American soldiers, causing them to panic and rush back to the edge of the cliff. But despite this, Doss refused to take cover, and while constantly under heavy fire by the enemy, though being totally exhausted, he spent hours carrying the wounded one by one to the edge of the escarpment. Then, to get the more severely wounded down, he tied a rope to a tree stump and lowered them down the cliff on a rope-supported stretcher to safety. When the stretcher kept slipping, he turned to a new method, looping the rope around the wounded men's chest and legs to lower them down. Doss, standing, exposed to potential enemy fire, was seen praying at the cliff edge as the men were being lowered down. And later he had said he had been praying to the Lord to help him get one more, and after that, one more, until they were all down. Calculating the wounded men at the base of the cliff, the captain worked out that Doss had saved around 75 men. The Americans would eventually go back up the cliff and on May 7th would take the position. By some miracle, Doss survived the whole battle totally unhurt, but that was soon to change. On May 21st, in the confusion of a night attack, Doss tended to the American wounded, risking being hit by both the Japanese and by friendly fire. Doss was in a shell hole with another American soldier when a grenade landed beneath him. His reflex action was to put his foot on it and was seriously wounded in both legs, as blood poured out from the impact of 17 pieces of shrapnel in his body. But he remained in his position for 5 hours, tending to himself while also helping others who were wounded, until a medic and a pair of litter bearers could get to him. But that was not the end of it that day. for as he was being stretchered to safety, they got caught in an enemy tank attack. As they took cover, Doss spotted a critically injured man and insisted that he be taken back on the stretcher instead of himself. While Doss waited for the litter bearers to return, he was found and helped back by a fellow soldier. Suddenly, Doss was hit by a Japanese sniper's bullet and suffered a compound fracture to his arm. The two men took cover in a shell hole. Realizing how badly injured he now was, Doss instructed the soldier on how to bind his rifle stock to his shattered arm to act as a splint. Eventually pushing through excruciating pain, he would make it back to the aid station. The U.S. Army recognized Doss's extreme bravery, and he was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his heroic and selfless actions at Okinawa from April 29th to May 21st, 1945. Because of his heroic actions, many wounded men made it back home. Desmond Doss would go on to run a small family farm with his wife Dorothy, and lived to the age of 87.
Oh man. Wow, thank you very much, Michael and Kimberly, for that request. I'll never tire of hearing that man's story. It should never not be told. The film, of course, I've seen it, Hacksaw Ridge, based on all of that you've heard there. First up is religious beliefs. He stands true to what they are. Of course, his Sabbath in his denomination is the Saturday, not the Sunday, and this led to the anger within fellow troops that were in training with him. That he was different, he was getting special treatment, didn't eat meat. That was probably like, what is this guy? Who is this guy? Why is he not eating meat? So he was already different. It's not good being different in the military, but people, suppose, all looking to kind of make a name for themselves and get a bit of recognition for being good soldiers or whatever. When you're going through training, you want to be recognised for being good at what you do. But Doss wasn't interested in fitting in. All he was interested in doing was doing his best, but also staying true to what he believed in. So this went against what most people liked, and that led him to being bullied. He eventually got his wishes, and he got moved from being like a normal regular infantry soldier and made a medic. And I suppose if you fast forward to where he's drafted out to war, it just goes on from there, doesn't it? Didn't have a weapon, but what he did have was the Lord on his side, and a relentless will to save his comrades' lives, no matter how much danger he was in, no matter who that you were, no matter what you have done to him in the past. I know he was bullied off a certain individual who later became obviously a friend. Obviously the man didn't really know much at the time of what he was doing and why he was doing it to him. He was wrong for doing it, and then he's realised that, and he's asked for guidance of Doss, which just shows you no matter what way he was treated, he was still a gentleman to whoever was mean to him. Which is admirable, but he was relentless in his approach to trying to save his comrades' lives. The improvisation of how to do it is just nothing short of incredible. Obviously harnessing people down around the stretcher too heavy. He was already suffering a leg injury. He's lowering them down around the legs and the body, balancing their weight out a little bit better and making it more lightweight and more manageable for him to lower down. But to save, what was it, 75 lives or something off the battlefield is just, his own personal story is just one that blows me away. If anybody in history deserves the Congressional Medal of Honor, it's Doss. And right at the very end it tells you he goes on and he just lives a humble life with a wife on a farm, lives to 87 years old, obviously still practicing being a devout Christian and his own beliefs there. But even the things like, when you listen to it, which kind of blows you away a little bit, when you think of the ration packs that they would have been given, which would have been probably back in the days, Second World War, obviously in the Pacific, you're quite away from home, quite a distance away from home, sorry. So getting supplies to the troops would probably have been quite difficult anyway. And not only that, there's meat in it, and he's a vegetarian at a time where people just weren't vegetarians really. So to get meat in your ration packs already kind of like puts you down to minimum rations. So he's had to improvise there, drawing in enemy fire when he's trying to retrieve food. So there's the exhaustion of being hungry, trying to retrieve your food up trees under enemy gunfire, the fear of that, the physical strain of trying to get up one of those trees to get a fresh coconut because it was making him sick. So you're obviously lack of, presumably he was getting vomit and diarrhea from eating bad coconuts from the ground. So he's already losing fluids and having to do his job no matter what. You can't not soldier, you have to do your job regardless. So it's just absolutely incredible, and I've got to say thanks again to Michael and Kimberly, patron and a channel member there, for that request. If you did not know that story, I'm delighted to be able to share it with you, and I would suggest you watch the film Hacksaw Ridge. The man is just unbelievable for lack of a better word. I mean, that you run out of superlatives for people like that. That is a true hero. Didn't need a weapon, didn't want to take a life. He would be more ruthless in his approach to saving lives, not taking lives, and that is just in its own right in a war zone unheard of, but just incredible. The link to the original video, as always, will be in the description section below. If you would like a personalised video request or shout out, check out our Patreon account there as well, or simply join the channel as a member on the channel page, or under every video you'll have join. Just click on that and that's how you can do that. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment and share, and put the bell on so you don't miss any of our future uploads. That would be fantastic. And that's everything. Thanks very much, and I'll see you all soon. Goodbye.